Here we are, midweek Bible class, John chapter 2, verse 1, and what a story it's going to be. This is actually a pretty funny story. And I hope that you don't just look at it and think, oh yeah, turned water to wine, he does miracles, and move on, because you would be missing a vast amount of humanity and humor in this story. You ready? On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. Already, I'm noticing something. Now, I used to teach a whole semester-long course on the difference between men and women and how we communicate. So I can't do that whole semester right here, can't replicate it. But one of the things that I noticed very quickly when I see this is Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited. Men are generally not that excited about going to weddings. You'll find some who are, but most are thinking, oh man, they take forever, and then there are the pictures, and then there's a reception, and you've been invited, yay. And so the women, though, they're there. They notice everything. They notice every decoration, every candle, every bit of lace and fabric. They notice all the centerpieces and comment on those. And then they notice the shoes. It's amazing. When my wife and I were first married, she would even ask questions like, "Did you see her shoes?" No, I did not. Who are we even talking about? And it's again, this is something that women have as a rule. We're talking about 80% here, so there are always exceptions. As a rule, have got the eagle eyes out and they're there. But the guys are they're there because they got to be there, hoping there'll be cake. They're holding out hope for that. That's about all they can ask for. And if they brought gifts, they do plan to eat $200 worth of cake because got to find a way to make a profit. Well, next line. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Now, ladies, you think you are speaking directly to your husband and he should know then the proper response. No, it's not going to happen. That even after being married 45 years, my wife and I go through this. Whenever what can I do for you? And she will phrase it in a way as, there's a possibility that there's something over here that it could be done if this didn't, instead of saying, "Would you move this?" That's what we want. We're very simple creatures, men. And you often think you're being direct, ladies, when you're not. And I use this story a lot to illustrate this phenomena. Now, I need to stress that this story never happened. I just like to use the story. All right. Let's say my wife and I are driving home one evening, and my wife says, "Would you like some ice cream?" And I'm thinking for a while, going, "No, I really don't want any ice cream." And I drive home. I'm in trouble. Now, I'm not allowed to know why I'm in trouble because I'm supposed to know. And then I just noticed that the evening's gone a little awkward. Maybe my wife is cleaning things in the kitchen with a bit more enthusiasm than that generally requires, with clanging of things. And so your husband, whoever, in this story, it's me, will lean around the doorway. Now, you don't want to expose your body, so you just kind of put your head around there a bit and say, "Honey," and you put your voice up high so that she will assume you're one of her children and perhaps have mercy on you. "Honey, is everything okay?" And she'll go, "It's fine. Everything's fine. What could be wrong? If it's fine." Well, that's when you know it's not fine. We get that part. But you're not allowed, and so you just start searching and you have no idea what's going on. And then 30 years later, you're laying in the hospital bed and you look and her hand's hovering over the life support system plug. And you're saying, "Why?" And she'll say, "Because you didn't get me ice cream." We didn't know you wanted ice cream. If you were to say, "Honey, I'd like some ice cream," we will cross 6 lanes of traffic and a curb to get it for you, because we want you happy and we want to be your hero. And while we're probably not going to be able to wipe out a room of mafiosi that are going to kidnap you, The better scenario, more likely scenario, is that if you want ice cream, you tell us, we get you ice cream, we're your hero. See, that's the way that's supposed to work. So Mary, Jesus' mother, tells him they have no more wine. You know what she thinks she's saying? She thinks she's saying, oh, they are terribly embarrassed. Please help them out here. They need more wine. That's what she thinks she said. But she didn't. Now, Jesus, being the creator of woman 1.0, he knows this, and he's got a big edge on women's communication. So he knows what she's really asking is for his help in keeping the host from being embarrassed. So he says, dear woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come. Now, the dear is added by the NIV for a good reason. In the manuscripts, it just says woman. And whenever we talk to each other, if I said woman, for some reason, that's looked upon as kind of aggressive and not polite. So we need to understand that in their society, it's the same thing as saying, dear lady, ma'am, mom. It was not an impolite thing. Now let's review a little bit. She doesn't tell him to do something, but thinks she did. He says, no. With all due respect, dear woman, my time has not yet come for me to take care of things like this. Next scene, his mother says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Let's review again. She didn't tell him that he needed to act. He knew what she was saying, so he told her no. She assumed that meant yes. Does this sound familiar to any of the men that I'm talking to today? It should, because this in 80% of male-female relationships, this is the norm. And women will say, no, I am very plain. And I will listen to them and I'm going, there's not a plain statement there. Not in a man's point of view. And therefore, the man's standing over there going, I don't know what she thinks. And she's mad because he doesn't know what she means. Ladies, do not try to make your men think like you. If they could think like you, why would we need so many of you around? We need your different thoughts. We need your different perspectives, but we also need some direction. It'll be, for example, a woman will tell her kids, be nice. Well, that has no meaning at all. The dad will come in and say, if you hit your brother again, I'm taking your toy away. Okay, more direct. So I'm not saying men are better. What I'm saying is, ladies, understand that when you talk, you sound like Mary. And when we say no, and you assume that means yes, we're confused. Jesus is not. I can't help but think when he looks over and sees her telling the servants, now you do whatever he tells you to do. He just kind of goes, okay, this is really going to make some Christians upset though down the road, because we're going to be talking about alcohol here. And it is alcohol. Do not let anybody try to tell you. I grew up in a church where the preacher said that this is grape juice. No, not at all. We'll get to that. All right. I can prove to you it's not grape juice. Probably a dozen different ways, but we don't even have to go to the language for that. We can do that in this story. All right. I remember I was asked to speak in Arkansas at a county that was a dry county. Those of you that are outside the United States, counties have the right in most states to decide whether alcohol can be sold in that county or not. And you can usually know where they are because right before you hit the county, there'll be a whole bunch of liquor stores and bars because people from that county are crossing the county line constantly. Well, this church was in a famously dry county in Arkansas, and they had me teaching on this passage, and I stopped all of a sudden. I looked at him and I said, you guys wouldn't have let Jesus do this miracle in your county. And there was some nervous twittering there. I'm not always as funny as I think I am. Well, nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. What? You and I, we look at that and go, and he's going to get water in there and turn it to wine. What we don't understand is that anybody in the first couple centuries reading this would have been, what? Because ceremonial washing jars have nothing to do with wine at all. In fact, that is kept away from anything one might consume, wine or water. These are washing jars. The water in there is considered unclean after you've washed. They would come in, and there were rituals by this time, as in most societies. There are rituals around eating, and you would dip one hand in and you'd wash, and then as the water ran off this elbow, there was one prayer, and the water ran off this elbow, there was another prayer. Nothing silly about it. It's just the way that they did their prayers and their ablutions to wash their hands. Ablutions is a much better word than the old English way of phrasing it, to do your toilet, which had nothing to do with the little porcelain thing. Just you wash up, you come out. But that stuff, even the splashage, is unclean. So if somebody's coming by with a tray with food and some of this water splashes on it, you can't eat the food. It is unclean, it's kept away. It is rather like if you were watching a movie and it was an action chase scene and you're really getting into it, and they're hitting the obligatory fruit cart, and the woman with the baby is barely missed, all the things that are in every chase scene, right? And then all of a sudden it cuts away and you're looking at a plane in Africa and they're saying, the meerkat colony has really grown this year. You're going, what does that have anything to do with what we're watching? That's exactly the feeling they would have here. We're not talking about that. We're talking about wine, wedding. Why are you talking about the sink? And there's a reason for it. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. And they filled them to the brim. Once again, you did not fill these jars to the brim. Why? The splashage. That's unclean water there. You keep it in the jar. Now that many of you are still saying, well, why would you wash your hands when it's, other people have washed their hands in front of you? And you are showing that you are young and wonderful people, and we love you dearly. By the time you watch this, I will have hit a birthday and I'd be 68. When I was a boy, they'd run the bath water, and that was the bath water for my two sisters and then me. You didn't change the bath water. We didn't have a shower unit, I don't believe. Maybe we did, but I don't remember any of those. And it used to be that they would fill up the sink and everybody would wash off in the sink. And yes, it would be a little brown and gritty by the time you were done, but that's because water was precious, expensive. And by the way, I know your water bill is high, but when you take a look at your wages versus water cost, it is so much cheaper now than it was 50, 60 years ago. And hard to get back in these days. You had to go get the water source. You had to bring it in bucket by bucket. It was not easy done. If you are in some countries, I remember a good friend of mine was a missionary in Africa, in Uganda, I believe it was, when they'd been out all day and he was a little dirty and he'd been invited into dinner and they brought him a bowl of water and he just scrubbed up and all this other, and it was pretty dirty when he was done. So he took it and he tossed it out, and he came back and they were all just staring at him because that was the water for the rest of them too. See? So you don't fill them to the brim. It's going to be dirty water. Why'd they fill them to the brim? I don't know, but I have an idea. I've got a guess. You ready for the guess? Mary. We often see pictures of Mary, and she's always this white woman, quite a surprise in first century Judaism, obviously. And she is wearing, she's a brunette. For some reason, Jesus is usually a blonde or, dirty blonde, something in there, but brunette, and she's wearing blue, usually with a little white headband in there somewhere. Looks, rather more like a nun than a first century Jew, because that's when they started making pictures of her. And she's holding either the dying Jesus or the baby Jesus, her head cocked to the side, a little shiny, a little glowing like a dollar store nightlight. That's what we see when we see pictures of Mary. Mary would have had wrinkles. She, by this time, probably had more than one tooth gone. She would have had scars and calluses on her hand. Please remember that her reputation was not a good reputation. Mary was perfect, do not get me wrong. Mary is a wonderful, wonderful woman, and we should respect her far more than Protestants tend to do. That said, in her society, people did not believe her story about Jesus' birth. Her own sons didn't until Jesus' resurrection, according to Scripture. And in fact, twice in Scripture, they try to come take control of him because they think he's gone crazy. Yeah. And there are times that people would confront Jesus and go, we know who our Father is. Mary's reputation all of her life would have been a poor one that she did not deserve. She had to be a tough woman. Now, was she beautiful? I don't know. You don't know. Wouldn't upset me if she was gorgeous, but I got the feeling she was a hard-worn woman by this stage because Joseph's been long gone. We don't know why. Dead? Deserting? We don't know. And so she is back there when Jesus goes, fill the jars with water. Just kind of going, all right, you fellow. And I will confess that in some of this story, I'm kind of channel my mother. My mother, a little Irish lady, fierce as she could be, but incredibly optimistic and the like. But when she wanted you to get something done there, son, you were going to get it done. I took care of her the last few years of her life with a lot of great help from my sister and also help from our Safe Harbor folk when I'd be out of town or the like. I mean, everybody was so gracious and kind. And everybody fell in love with her, but they also knew she was a dynamo. When she was released into the room was going to change, whether it wanted to be changed or not. And I feel like Mary had a lot of that spirit in her. And so they fill it to the brim. Then he tells them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. There is everything wrong with that statement. Everything wrong. First of all, Jesus didn't have to do any of this. He could have just said no again, or to please his mother, he could have just refilled the wine skins or the amphorae, which are the jugs that were used for wine, well away from the jugs that are used for washing. He could have done it without saying a word, just wanting it done, and all of a sudden those wineskins, and they're full. He didn't do that. He turned to the washing up jars, the jars of ritual, rules, tradition, legalism, and he used those. Think about that for a while. We'll get back to that. And then I want you to put yourself in the place of the caterer, the one responsible for making sure there is wine there, for making sure the food is good. You don't get an online website. You don't get to scrub your Google reviews. Everything is word of mouth, and since you never live anywhere except right there, and most likely will never travel more than 10 or 15 miles away from the place you were born, your reputation hangs on every single thing. And here's a man, from all indications, that you've never met before, that says, dip the cup in the washing up water and take it to the guy in charge of the banquet. That's a guy that pays you. That's a guy that could ruin you. You're out of business the rest of your life if this goes sideways. Would you have done it? Would you? In almost every Jesus story, I find myself confronted with the question, would you have done it? Like the feeding of the 5,000. 5,000 people out there, they're all hungry. And it says 5,000 men. Please understand, it doesn't mean 5,000 men plus the women and children. 5,000 men means 5,000. Language being what it is. It includes the others. But nobody thought to bring lunch. One little boy's mama send him with a basket, which is, kind of like their Tupperware, with a few loaves and fishes, and Jesus's posse finds him, brings him to Jesus, and Jesus goes, okay, line everybody up. Would you really? Seriously. You're looking at a few pieces of bologna and some white bread and a little bit of mayonnaise, and you're going, well, let's just line up 5,000 people, shall we? Really? But they did. Sometimes when the apostles waver a bit or have questions that we look back on after 2,000 years of the Holy Spirit leading us and go, that's a silly question. Sometimes we give the apostles a kicking when they don't deserve it. Their faith was far beyond any of my faith. And all those things where I asked, would I have done it? They did it. I don't know why the caterer does this. They did so. They took it to him. I want you to think, put yourself, come on, be an empathetic person. Put yourself inside their skin now. You gonna be shaken a bit? I certainly would be. You gonna duck a little bit away before he takes that first sip? I certainly would have if I got to that point. Master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. And here's an unnecessary sentence in the Bible. Yes, I said what I said. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who'd drawn the water knew. I know he didn't know where it came from because he tasted the wine. You've got over here 120 to 180 gallons of wine, but it's in the bathtub and it's in the sinks. Of course he didn't know. I've talked to God about this and said, some of these sentences you really didn't need to write. You could have saved that ink and then told us a little bit more about this story here or this story there. But, God does what he does, and I'm one of his problem children, but he loves me anyway. You might be one of his problem children too. He loves you too. That said, then he called the bridegroom aside. Oh my goodness, if you're the caterer right now, you'd be calling Habib to bring around the camel. You're getting out of there, wouldn't you? In fact, Jesus, if he had just been one of us, would have done that when the mom says they're out of wine. He'd have gone, well, bummer, we're done. At the end of the wedding, if they turned to you and said, something, the cake didn't arrive, the meal didn't arrive, the music guy didn't arrive, so have a nice evening. The women would feel a little cheated. The men would be angry. Jesus could have just left. They call the bridegroom over. The caterer's going, because he's going to tell the bridegroom, what is this? There are times where I travel. I spend about half my life on the road, it seems. And in fact, whenever you're watching this, I'll still be stateside. But in this year, I'm going to be in Africa, I'm going to be back in Scotland. I'm going to be most likely in Israel and a couple of other places, plus visiting you. If there are 5 or more of you in an area that want to meet me, I'm happy to come. Let us know where you are, though. We don't know where 99% of our viewers are. Truly. Even if you're on our newsletter list, it doesn't mean we know where you are. You have to send in to info@oursafeharbor.com your name and address and say, I'd like to be on the people map so that when Patrick comes to the region, I can know he's coming and where he's going to be. All right? Okay. Commercial done. There are times I've been in people's homes and, maybe we're going to have dinner or lunch or something, but we're sat around talking and now people are busy. And a little toddler will come up with one of those little plastic cups that they like to play with. And they'll have water in it. And they'll say, here. And you take it. It's really cute. A little kid wants to give some water to the minister. Isn't that really nice? And then you start to think, what source of water can this kid reach? And that's whenever you do that thing adults do about, this is great water over here. Oh, look, there's a plant. Look behind you. And you get concerned. And by the way, when you travel, isn't water one of our biggest concerns? You only drink out of a bottle that you yourself have opened. That's one of the big rules when you travel. Well, here he's drinking it. He calls aside the bridegroom and says, now, everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best till now. You almost see the caterer going, ooh, ooh, yeah. Did that really? We did great. Now, told you about, you don't need to know Greek, and you don't need to even know the customs of the time to understand reading this, that this was actually wine. And by the way, some people say, well, yeah, it was, but it's super, super diluted. No, stop it. They did dilute their wine a lot, just as, because during the day, just swigging wine, but it was a meant, I've had people say, it was a way to purify the water. There's not enough alcohol in wine to purify water. It's rather like during COVID, when some people decided, well, we could pour vodka on our hands. Nope. Vodka normally runs around 40% alcohol. You're going to need at least 65 to 75% alcohol to do anything on that. So, no. Here, let's do it this way. Everybody brings out the best grape juice first. And then when everybody is thoroughly graped, they bring out the cheap grape juice. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? Now, am I suggesting these people got blind, raging drunk? No, although 120 to 180 gallons of wine is a lot of wine. I don't know how big this party was and how long it lasted. And this was, if you remember, the secondary source of wine. What I'm saying is this. We don't need to be silly about this. The Bible has a lot to say about drunkenness and gluttony, and it is opposed to both. But I've heard an awful lot of sermons raging against having a single beer because it'll lead to your perdition, and by people who were morbidly obese and who rejoiced and talked often about how much they loved eating this much at that restaurant and this much at that one, and how much at potlucks they went back for their third time. Gluttony is a sin, so is drunkenness. But eating is not a sin. And the Bible talks about wine given to us as a gift. I don't particularly care for wine, to be honest. I don't. But I'm not opposed to it religiously. I'm opposed to being drunk, buzzed even. I'm opposed to that. Certainly, no driving. You have to be responsible. And everything given to us is given to us with its place and time. So you don't need to be a teetotaler for God to like you. Because this is Jesus' first miracle. And what did he do? Instead of refilling the wine skins or the amphorae where the wine would have been stored, he turned and looked at all of those rules and all of those laws and all of those traditions and all those things that people put between us and joy in God, and said, no. And he turned the jar's unclean water of tradition into the wine of great joy. And the Bible says in the next verse, this, the first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee, by this he revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. Now, you've probably read that before thinking, yeah, because they saw he did a miracle. No. I'm going to say this as bluntly as I can. In the miracle stories of Jesus, almost without exception, the actual miracle is the least impressive part of the story. Because he is God, I assume he can do all those miracles. It is who he is, why he's doing it, the way he does it. It's all the context that impresses me, blows me away, in fact. He chose the water source for a reason. He did it on purpose. He had come to set all of those legalism rules aside and remove everything that keeps you from having joy in God aside. And churches ever since have been trying to shove them back into place. So that, yes, you love Jesus, and sign our doctrinal statement, and agree that this is the way to worship, and if your religion is Jesus and, get the and out. Because Jesus turned the water to wine, the sink water, the bathtub water into wine. He turned the rules into joy and celebration. And that's the good news you need to take away from this first miracle of Jesus in his ministry. God bless you. Look forward to continuing this fun journey, because it's going to be fun. John is a fun, exciting, and powerful book. It's mind-blowing. So you ready for more? We'll see you next Wednesday.